subscribe and tap the bell. Twice a day, we bring you the real words of the Stoics, not paraphrased, not softened. The phrase Amor Fati, love of fate, actually comes from Friedrich Nietzsche, writing in the late 19th century, nearly 2,000 years after the Stoics. Nietzsche wasn't a Stoic and often argued directly against them. But when he wrote that his formula for greatness in a human being was that one wants nothing to be other than it is, he was, whether he fully credited it or not, restating something Marcus Aurelius had already written in a Roman military tent centuries earlier. This video is about the original version. Marcus writes, translated by George Long, "Everything harmonizes with me which is harmonious to thee, O universe. Nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee." He's addressing the natural order directly, almost like a private vow. Whatever the universe delivers, on whatever schedule it delivers it, Marcus commits in advance to receiving it as timely rather than as an interruption. Not gritted teeth tolerance. Actual agreement with the timing itself. This is a sharper claim than simple acceptance, and worth separating from it. Acceptance can still carry resentment underneath. Fine, this happened, I'll deal with it, but I wish it hadn't. Amor Fati, in the Stoic original, asks for something closer to genuine alignment, not just permitting the event to have occurred, but treating your own preference as the thing that was mistaken, if it ever disagreed with what actually happened. Marcus isn't telling himself to tolerate the universe. He's telling himself the universe's timing was correct, and any discomfort he feels about it is information about his own judgment, not about the event. Epictetus builds his entire handbook around a close relative of the same idea, though he frames it as instruction rather than private vow. His opening lines, translated by Elizabeth Carter, tell his students that a tranquil life comes from lining up your wishes with events, rather than lining up events with your wishes, and ordering most people run backwards their entire lives without noticing. Marcus takes that same instruction and turns it into something closer to gratitude, addressed straight to the universe itself as though it were a correspondent worth thanking. Marcus applies the idea to something as small as a career choice, not just cosmic tragedy. "Love the little trade which thou hast learned, and be content with it," he writes, in a passage about accepting the specific shape of the life a person actually has, rather than measuring it constantly against an imagined better one running in parallel somewhere else. This is Amor Fati at the smallest possible scale, not the acceptance of catastrophe, but the acceptance of an ordinary, particular, non-negotiable life, with its actual trade, actual limitations, and actual shape, instead of the improved draft a person keeps privately auditioning instead of living. Underneath the sentiment sits an actual argument the Stoics took seriously as physics, not just as mood management. Chrysippus, the school's great systematizer generations before Marcus, illustrated it with a cylinder rolling down a slope. Push the cylinder, and it starts moving, that's fate, the external cause. But it rolls the way it does, smoothly, in the specific manner a cylinder rolls, because of its own shape, not the shape of a cube or a sphere, that's the part contributed by the thing itself. Applied to a person, the argument holds that outside events push you, undeniably, the way the push starts the cylinder. But how you respond, the specific manner of your rolling, still comes from your own nature and judgment. Amor Fati isn't asking you to pretend the push didn't happen. It's asking you to take ownership of the rolling, which was always the part that was actually yours. It's worth being honest about how demanding this actually is, because Stoic content online tends to flatten it into a slogan. Marcus wasn't writing this from comfort. He wrote his notebook while burying children, managing a plague that emptied Roman cities, and fighting wars on the frontier for most of his reign. Loving the timing of that isn't a mood he could switch on. It reads more like a discipline he had to rebuild, entry by entry, against his own resistance to it, which is exactly why the notebook needed so many separate attempts at saying the same thing. Nietzsche, centuries later, arrived at nearly the same formula from an entirely different philosophical direction, rejecting most of what Marcus actually believed about providence and cosmic order along the way. That two such different thinkers, separated by 18 centuries and opposed worldviews, converged on the identical demand, want the thing that happened, not a better version of it, is itself a kind of evidence. Not proof, but a strong signal that the demand isn't an artifact of Stoic theology specifically. It's closer to a durable observation about what actually reduces suffering in a human mind, discovered independently by people who agreed on almost nothing else, one arguing from a rational, providential cosmos, the other from a universe he considered indifferent to human wishes by design, both landing on the same instruction anyway. There's a practical difference between Amor Fati and mere resignation that's worth naming directly, because from the outside the two postures can look identical. Resignation says, "This happened, I had no say, nothing to be done." Amor Fati says something stranger and more demanding, "This happened, and I choose to treat it as the correct starting point for whatever comes next, rather than as a debt the universe owes me for the interruption." Resignation closes a door. Amor Fati treats the door as never having needed to open the way you'd originally planned, and gets to work from wherever it actually stands, without spending further energy litigating how it should have gone instead. This is, admittedly, easier to state as a rule than to run as a habit, which is exactly why Marcus needed to keep writing it down rather than simply believing it once and moving on. A single sentence in a notebook doesn't install a disposition permanently. It's closer to a rep in a routine that has to be repeated for as long as the mind keeps defaulting back to the easier, more natural habit of wanting things to have gone differently than they actually did. None of this asks you to stop trying to change what's still changeable. Marcus commanded armies and issued edicts. He wasn't passive about the parts of his empire he could still influence. Amor Fati applies specifically to what has already happened and can no longer be revised, the timing already spent, the outcome already settled. For everything still open, the Stoics have an entirely different set of instructions. For everything closed, this is the instruction, not tolerance, agreement, offered to a universe that, as Marcus put it, was never running early or late in the first place, a vow he had to renew again and again in that same notebook, meant for no one but the man forcing himself, night after night, to actually mean it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and the Stoics they trained, straight from the source, twice a day.